little boy in a baseball hat stands in the field with his ball.
I've played sports all my life. From the time I was able to walk, I ventured onto nearly every type of field or court. Didn't matter what time practice was or how many games I'd be playing on a 108-degree humid Texas Saturday in July, I'd be there. I experimented with other sports, but baseball had become my passion. I played every season from the time I was 4 or 5 all the way into college. I nearly missed a season when I was 8. My behavior in school had apparently left something to be desired and caused my mom to withhold registration as punishment. I'd already spent most of that school year grounded for various random acts of rebellion. I was a good student grade-wise. I'd even been accepted into the gifted and talented program. But I tested my teachers daily, pushing them just short of sending me to timeout. That was my name on the board and 2 check marks. Unfortunately, knowing just how close to the line to walk in elementary school does not mean that a phone call from your teacher will not change the location of that line at home. I was a good distance past it now, and after pleading and negotiating all evening, I was sent to bed defeated, assured I would not be playing in the upcoming season. I didn't give up, though. I changed my tactic. I sat just inside the doorway to my room, close enough to catch a bit of light from the nightlight in the hallway, but not so close I'd be discovered, and wrote an elegant piece of prose about fresh-cut grass, crisp morning air, and the crack of the bat and the smell of oiled leather. When I finished, I crept down the hallway, carefully leaned my bat up against my parents' doorway, placed my glove beneath that, and along with a perfectly staged baseball, left my literary masterpiece for my parents to happen upon on their way to bed. If I couldn't change my mother's mind with promises of monk-level silence, I was going to do it with emotion. I managed to convince her to let me play. My spring had been saved. For me, sports were always an outlet, a place to channel my energy, a place where I could compete and win, and a place where the score, without prejudice, let you know just how good you were. I say it this way intentionally, that the score defines success and failure. That's how it works, right? You see, the baseball field was my safe haven, my escape from my family life, my dysfunctional family life. I know what you're thinking. Everyone has a dysfunctional family life. But mine was different. I grew up with a mother who, despite her refusal to accept anything that would suggest fault in herself, had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I grew up with transactional love, feeling loved, important, and supported, and then, in an instant, made to feel as if I was unimportant, a disappointment, a failure, or guilty of hurting or embarrassing her. It was confusing as a child. When my mother spoke about me to others, I was wonderful, a perfect specimen of a boy. But behind closed doors, when there was no one around, it didn't matter how good my grades were, how clean my room was, or how quietly I sat while my mother visited with friends, I was never good enough. I was never certain if I had her approval or not. Conversely, when I was on the baseball field, I was never blindsided in such ways. I mean, I could see the scoreboard. I knew how I was performing. My coaches loved me. Baseball made sense. It was my escape until I was 10. Coach Farrell, who I played for at the time, was a tall, gangly man, deeply tanned, leather-like skin. He'd earned that skin from years of playing and then coaching baseball. He took the game very, very seriously, maybe too seriously for 10-year-olds. He pushed me hard, constantly demanding more, even when I was winning, and even more than the other boys, it seemed. The feeling that I could never be good enough had weaseled its way into the place where I'd always been safe. I was noticeably upset when I was picked up from practice one Wednesday evening. I told my mother how unfair it was, how Coach Farrell singled me out, and how I was playing better than the other boys, but it didn't seem to matter. She was angry and vowed to come to my defense. I begged her not to. Nothing good would come from it. The following Saturday, I was sitting in the dugout at the end of the bench furthest from the bleachers. I'd been the starting pitcher that day and had just come out of the game after reaching the league enforced pitch limit. Coach Farrell made his way down to where I was and strongly discussed the parts of the game where I could have done better. When he finished, he walked back to the other end of the dugout where he resumed his perch upon a 5-gallon bucket filled with baseballs. It was then that my mother made her move. I watched in fear as she did exactly that I had asked her to not. As my mother spoke through the chain link fence with my coach, several over-the-shoulder glances were thrown my way. I was positive this wouldn't help. It would only result in excuses followed by scrutiny of the newly outed narc, me. Coach Farrell explained to her that he didn't mean to push me unfairly, but he saw a lot of talent in me and knew I had the ability to do better than I was, talent he didn't see in the other boys, and thusly didn't expend the energy to push them as hard. It sounded to me like an excuse camouflaged with a compliment. Throughout the years, I occasionally encountered similar treatment from others, and continually from my mother. I didn't narc anymore, though. I'd figured out that it didn't help. It was easier to suck it up, push a little more, and hope for approval. It wasn't until high school that my built-up resilience of being made to feel inadequate was tested to its limit again. I had moved to a new town 3 years earlier, an hour north of where I'd spent the first 14 years of my life. I was 17 and playing varsity baseball for, believe it or not, Coach Farrell. Not the same Coach Farrell that I'd played for in my youth. This was his older brother. I fought my own battle this time. I went to him and asked why I seemed to be singled out, and I got the same answer I'd been given years before. I know you've got more in you. You can be better. You've got to stop grab-assing around. That was Coach Farrell's favorite way of telling us to quit, well, grab-assing around. I didn't agree. I gave it my all. By the time I'd finished high school, I realized the whole pushing to be better thing was something I'd encountered many times in my life, some justly and some not so. I graduated with honors and 33 hours of college credit, really close but not quite at the top of my class, lettered 4 or 5 times, despite scoring really well on my SAT, took it again at my mother's insistence that I could do better. The next fall, I attended Texas A&M University, joined the Corps Cadets, and learned that the pushing I had been so averse to in my past was child's play compared to what I was experiencing now. I was being broken down to be built back up. It wasn't something I absorbed willingly. My 10-year-old self's internal frustration at times grew to man-sized rage. The adjutant general in the commandant's office knew me very well. It took me years to find the silver lining of my parents, coaches, teachers, and senior officers pushing. I still get hesitant and defensive at times when I feel unfairly pushed or demanded of effort I feel is not equal across the board. What I did realize, though, is that through all the pushing from others, I learned to push myself. Now I'm my toughest critic, and I constantly ask myself if I can do better. It's served me well, even if it's caused ridiculous OCD-level attention to detail and considerable stress leading up to deadlines. This last Thanksgiving, I sat with my sister and her 2 boys as she instructed us to write down 3 things we were thankful for, a new tradition she was starting. I filled out the first card with the obligatory booze. It was an answer I had preset the expectation for years earlier when I arrived completely hammered after being stuck on the tarmac with a carry-on full of travel-sized Crown Royal bottles. My second card was slightly more thoughtful with the answer family and friends. But my third card was where I really stopped grab-assing around and gave it a little more effort. My third card read, I'm thankful for the realization of growth, despite my initial emotion towards the lesson. And here I am, a product of my experiences both on the field and off, and I wouldn't change up any of it. It wouldn't be me, and that wouldn't be good enough.